Did you miss your deadline to renew your Medicaid coverage? You can still send your completed annual review form to Healthy Connections Medicaid. You may be assigned to another health plan, but you can ask to come back to First Choice within 60 days of renewed Medicaid eligibility. It's your family. It's your choice. First Choice is the right choice. Renew and choose us. Visit selecthealthofsc.com/renew to learn more.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
In August of 2016, prolonged rainfall from an unpredictable storm resulted in catastrophic flooding in the state of Louisiana. In my city of Denham Springs, 90% of the homes received water, some 4,200 homes. Of those, 3,000 of these homes received 18 inches or more of water, 25 to 30 inches of rain in less than 72 hours. The Amite River, which cuts through the heart of Livingston Parish, crested at 46.2 feet, some 5 feet above its previously recorded record and some 17.2 feet above its flood stage at Denham Springs. This is my story, as it was experienced through my own eyes, the day I saw the river rise. Hey, it's Jim Chapman, and I want to welcome you to episode 3 of The Day I Saw the River Rise. First, before I go into the next segment of this story, I do want to thank everyone out there for the encouraging words. I appreciate all of y'all listening. I've had several people, many people right here in my community of Denham Springs, Louisiana, Livingston Parish as a whole, that have had just amazing complimentary things to say about this. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you very much for all your complimentary words. I really do appreciate that. So let's get into the next episode. We're going to jump right into it. And when I left you last in episode 2, it was the 13th of August, 2016, and it was probably about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had just got to my mother-in-law's house. She was kind of high and dry at that point in time in my father-in-law's house, and our neighborhood was completely inundated in Denham Springs, Louisiana. That water within a couple hours time had went from no water at all being in anybody's yard, certainly not covering the streets, to probably at the point in time that I left being several feet. So that kind of tells you the speed in which this occurred. So let's pick it up. I'm at my mother-in-law's house, my father-in-law's house. I have my 3 children. At the time, as I said in episode 2, my children were, I believe, 10, and 12. My wife as well, and our dog, little Dotson named Happy. And she was none too happy about all this water. So we get there, and of course we're watching the news and those sorts of things like everyone else. Now at this time, my mother-in-law, or she still has this, but at this time my mother and father-in-law have a Generac generator. And so even if the electricity goes out, they don't lose electricity. It's pretty common here in Louisiana, these Generacs. And obviously with the storms we deal with, the hurricanes and those sorts of things, you got to have a Generac or a generator. But if you're fortunate enough to have a Generac, it just makes it easier on you. You ain't got to fight the gas lines. We all know how that went with Hurricane Ida this past year. So we're over there. We're watching the news. Of course, reports are coming in everywhere. It's flooding everywhere, not only in Livingston Parish, Baton Rouge, which I was unaware of until I saw those news reports, was really getting it. Flooding there, major, more to the, I guess it'd be the south side of Baton Rouge, just totally getting hammered with water, just like we were. But not as widespread, I guess you could say, as we were getting it, especially in Denham Springs, Louisiana. So basically, the next few hours were spent kind of coming up with a game plan. We were picking up things that we could pick up at my mother-in-law's house. And I want to take a minute. Let me tell you about my father-in-law, the situation he was in. That's very important to this story. And I'll tell you a little bit about him and his history. He was a well-known businessman here in Livingston Parish, Louisiana. He owned grocery stores. So these were AG food stores, Associated Grocers, for those who may not be aware of that. And he bought into AG fairly early. I believe his first AG store was back in the 70s. And back then, you didn't have what these AG stores are now. And just to explain to people that may not be in a Associated Grocers area, they're basically a buying group. So you buy stock into AG, and they basically pool all this buying power together for these these private grocery store owners, so that they can get the same competitive pricing that a large chain like a Albertsons or something would get. They realize they're stronger as a group as far as their buying power. So that's what AG is. And these are all independent grocery store owners that buy into AG, I guess you could say. And my father-in-law was one of the earlier ones to do that, and was very, very successful in business in this area. And to tell you about my father-in-law and how he was as a person, he was he might have been 5'4", maybe 5'5", I think 5'4". And Cajun, he's from the town of Arnerville, Louisiana. But he moved to Livingston Parish as soon as he was an adult, and I mean as soon as. Stayed a little while in Baton Rouge, then moved to Livingston Parish at the age of 18. This time, he was 72, something like that. So he had been in this parish for many, 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 many years. And all his businesses, with the exception of one, were in this parish. He, at that time, had a supermarket called Rod's Grocery, and that was on Highway 16, which is a highway that plays a big part in this story, and also known as Vincent Road. You'll remember from earlier episodes I told you about this. Way down Highway 16, going towards a village called Port Vincent, he owned a grocery store called Rod's, and it was very well known for its po' boys, especially. I mean, they made the best po' boys. And when I was dating my future wife, I can remember getting those po' boys, and I'm like, wow, I'm in love. They were really good, and it was really cool because I didn't have to pay for them because I was dating his daughter. So that was even better for a struggling guy trying to find his way in life. So that's who he was. Very smart businessman. Also owned a supermarket in a town called Holden, Louisiana, which was still in the parish of Livingston. It was actually called Holden Supermarket, and owned that for many, many years. At one point in time, they owned one called Judy's Superette, and that was in what was the Watson area of Livingston Parish, and that was way early on. And they also owned a grocery store in Bell River, and it was called Bell River Grocery. He had a lot going on, to say the least, and throughout his life. Very smart. And the reason I brought up his stature was he was a short guy. He was a Cajun guy, and believe it or not, even at the age of 70, he spoke pretty broken English. This is someone who in the third grade could not even speak English. He spoke Cajun French and actually failed the third grade because he could not speak English. But he grew up to be one of the sharpest businessmen you would ever meet. He actually retired with plenty of money in the bank. I believe he was 56 when he retired. And I spent many, many years under his kind of tutelage, just listening and learning and observing his shrewdness when it came to business. People didn't play with Rod because he would tell them real quick about themselves, as we say here in South Louisiana. So just an unbelievable man. When I had the honor of, I guess, performing his eulogy or eulogizing him at his funeral, and it's honestly one of the high points of my life, and just an absolute honor. We all miss him. But at this time, he was pretty bad off. He was bedridden, as you remember in episode 2. And it was a big concern of mine because I knew that water was coming at some point. I just knew it. I felt it. I knew that rain wasn't going to stop, and I knew that water was coming. And foremost on my mind was, how am I going to get this man out of here safely? And to tell you what the issue was, later in life, he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's and Lewy body dementia. And let me tell y'all, these are horrible, horrible diseases that I pray every day they find the cause of and a cure to. So at this point, it was very progressed, and he had become bedridden and wholly reliant on his wife, Judy, to take care of him. I considered it a huge responsibility of mine, in addition to having my 3 children, my wife, and my mother-in-law, and my dog, and keeping all of these people safe. So I knew that water was coming. I knew that was going to be a problem. That weighed across my mind heavily. So for several hours, we watched the weather. I went outside about every 15, 20 minutes and, is there any water in the yard yet? Is there any water in the street yet? All of those sorts of things. And it was gradually coming. At some point, I decided I was going to go kind of, obviously check my neighborhood. So I make my way back out front. And at this point, y'all, there are, 800 people on Highway 16 from as far as I could see. Everybody had been forced outside of their house, and they're on that major road. Highway 16 was up high. higher than the neighborhoods, obviously, and everybody was just kind of standing out there. People were putting tents, easy up tents out there, things like that. They had, I remember distinctly, 2 guys right out in front of my subdivision that actually stayed in my subdivision as well, and they were in the back of their truck with shotguns, and so they kind of had a premonition that things were going to get worse and there wasn't going to be a whole lot of help for us people that actually follow the law. So they were up there, and I was glad to see them at that point in time. Y'all, my street was just worse and worse with the flooding. And people, there were a bunch of people. There's a Walmart right down the road from me. It was dry. And it was up very high, and they had, cars, campers, you name it. It was that Walmart was packed as if they were shopping in there, but the Walmart was closed. It was just the parking lot was full because some people knew that was the highest point in the area. So if it was going to, the last thing that would flood would be that. So some people were smart enough that they went over there and sort of camped out there. So it was crazy, y'all, to see all this. It just blew my mind. So at that point, I head on back after checking kind of the water level in my neighborhood and seeing, it was probably halfway up the houses at this point. So I would estimate maybe 4.5, 5 feet, something like that. I go back to my mother-in-law's house after kind of surveying the situation, talking to several neighbors, trying to come up with a game plan with these folks. And I get back, and I remember my wife said to me, so what's it look like? And I didn't have the heart to tell her it was as bad as it really was. I'm just like, yeah, it's it looks like it might slack off. It's still raining, y'all. It's still raining. It was crazy. It would rain hard, like I say, for about 15 minutes, then it would slack off for 5, then it would rain hard for 15 minutes and slack off for 5, but it would never stop. And just strange. No breaks in it. So I didn't have the heart to tell her, that it was as high as it was in our neighborhood. I just kind of said, it's not good. It doesn't look like it's good, but it doesn't look like it went up a whole lot. And left it at that. So nighttime comes, and during this time, we've got cell service kind of going in and out. I had AT&T, which, believe it or not, Verizon at that time stayed on the whole entire time. But I had AT&T, and AT&T was tough. It would go in and out, in and out, in and out, very sporadic. So I would be able to get on Facebook for about 5-minute intervals. And I'm seeing pictures. I'm seeing people, there were some neighborhoods people were stuck. They were just like, we need help. We need a boat over here, all those sorts of things. But nighttime comes, and everybody's tired at this time, man. Let me tell you, when you're in a situation like this, it's also the stress that gets to you and makes you really, really tired. So everybody's tired, but nobody's sleeping, right? At this time, it was probably 9 o'clock, and it was summertime, so it didn't really truly get dark until 8. The last few hours of the day, it was filling up the driveway at this point, that water. But I had my truck parked out in the driveway, and I kept going out there and just checking. One thing that was on my mind was the tires. Once it goes over the tires, I'm going to be in trouble. I kept thinking that. Y'all got to remember, this was the last vehicle I had. I had 2 vehicles. I had mine and my wife's. And my wife's was flooded. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if I lose this truck, I'm really in a bind. Just checking the levels. Every probably hour, I would go out there with a flashlight, and it would go up and up and up. And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to lose my truck. And there's nowhere to bring it, y'all. Nowhere to bring it at this point. It's just, you're just watching. So probably about midnight, we see it. The water starts coming in, just like at my house. It's coming through the weep holes. And just like at my house, my mother-in-law is grabbing towels. My wife is grabbing towels, and they're actually stuffing it on where the door jamb is, when at the bottom of your entrance doors. And I'm like, come on, come on, y'all. It's not going to help. But I get it. It's panic, it's fear. And you're thinking, maybe I can keep it out. They're doing what they can. Totally get it. But in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, we're screwed. So the water starts coming in. And I would say within 20 minutes, carpet's ruined, right? You're walking, it's splashing. Here it comes. And that water keeps coming up, and eventually it goes over the door seals. At this time, it was probably about 4:30 in the morning when I started thinking we got to get everybody out of here. At that time, there was over a foot of water in her house. I'm thinking, we're going to end up with 5 feet in here. So it's time. It's game time, and I have no plan other than I've got to get everybody on the Highway 16. So the first thing I do is I tell my wife, and I'm going to see what the water level is like on Highway 16. She says, okay. And I remember I went out, and I can't remember why I did this, but I went out the window rather than the front or back door. The water at that point was so high we couldn't open the doors, might have been the issue. But I went out of the window, and they have a lot that my mother and father-in-law own right next to their house. So there's no house on that lot. So I remember walking through that, trying to find the sidewalk. Y'all got to remember that when it floods like that, it's like a lake. You can't see anything. And this is dirty water, y'all. This is Amite River water. It is totally brown. And then at nighttime, it's totally black. You can't see. All I could think was there's got to be 100 snakes, probably 5 feet from me. I mean, it was crazy. You couldn't find the sidewalks. You couldn't find the street. You were just kind of feeling with your shoes. You could feel yourself sinking in grass, and then you'd feel yourself kind of walking in concrete. Make matters worse, it was nighttime, so you really couldn't see anything. The street lights were all out, so there was nothing. I mean, there was you could not freaking see. But I meander my way around, make my way out of the neighborhood. And Highway 16 sitting there, and I didn't see anybody at this point in time. There's cars all lined up and down it where people were smart enough to move their cars to that road. And the road itself is still dry. The interesting thing was, as I was walking out to go kind of check things, the more I would walk to get out of that subdivision, the deeper that water would get. Obviously, it wasn't, completely graded even throughout that neighborhood. So where my mother-in-law lived, it was actually up higher than the front of the subdivision. So as you walked, the water got deeper and deeper and deeper, and it actually ended up being about chest deep by the time I made it to the front of the subdivision. It was like a little bowl. And then you go out of the subdivision and you're on 16. So it was deep. And I'm like, man, this is going to end up this deep in my mother-in-law's part of the subdivision. And he would, my father-in-law would drown, period.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent offered us a 10-year, $500,000 policy for nearly $50 a month. Then we called SelectQuote. SelectQuote found us identical coverage for only $19 a month, a savings of $369 a year.
Whether you need a $500,000 policy or a $5 million policy, SelectQuote could save you more than 50% on term life insurance.
For your free quote, go to SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. That's SelectQuote.com.
SelectQuote. We shop, you save. Full details on example policies at SelectQuote.com/commercials.
So I got to get everybody out of here, including my kids who would likely drown. So I go back and I tell my wife, we got to get everybody on that road as soon as possible. And she's like, I'm not leaving my daddy. And I said, you're going to have to leave your daddy. And I won't leave your daddy. You understand? I said, I won't leave him. Your job will be to get someone back here with a boat. I don't care what you have to do, but you get someone back here with a boat. And she said, basically, what's the plan? I said, well, I'll take the girls out first. And then I'll come get you. Or I'll get my son, and then I'll come get you. And then I'll sit here and wait for a boat. Now, looking back on this, I don't know why. I can't remember why I didn't bring my wife out first. I can't remember. I think I hadn't convinced her at that time she was going to have to leave her daddy. And, you got to know my wife's relationship with her father was very, very close. And so it took a lot of convincing on my part to even get her to leave that house. So it might have been that reason. And I was like, well, I got to get the kids out of here, and then I'll get you out of here. You're coming regardless. Whatever it was, my daughter I brought out first. And one of my daughters, I have twin girls. So I bring my daughter. And I'll never forget, she's, of course, these are 10-year-old girls, and they're freaking out. I mean, they've never seen anything like this. The water is deep. They don't swim very good. And, they know about snakes and all that stuff. So they're freaking out. So I said, okay, I'm going to carry you out. And she got on my back as if I'm, packing her like a backpack. And off we go, and I'm trying to make it like as fun as possible. Well, I knew it was going to get deeper as we kept walking. It was going to freak her out. And sure enough, as we kept walking, now the water's going up her legs, and it's past my hips, right? So it's hitting her legs, and then it's hitting the upper part of her legs. And she is like choking me to the point. I remember I'm like, you have got to ease up on my neck. You're about to choke me to death. And I finally get her out of there. And y'all, I cannot tell you how hard it is to walk through flood water, especially flood water with a current, which is what this was. It's very hard. It's double hard when you have someone on your back, even if they're just a 10-year-old. It's tough. When it gets up around your chest and you've got a current coming and you've got someone on your neck, I don't care who you are. It's tough. So I reach the front and I realize there's no one out here that I know. There's no one out there at that time. And I'm about to leave my 10-year-old daughter on the road by herself and turn around and get her sister and bring her out there. And I'm thinking, I can't just leave my daughter out here, but I have to. What do I do? In my mind, I'm thinking, what do I do? I was praying I would see someone up there I knew. But there's no one. It's pitch black. And here's the first crazy thing that happened, y'all. I get to the front to Highway 16, and I see a figure walking down the highway towards me, passing cars, and it's a female, and she's walking fast, y'all. And I said, ma'am, will you stay with my daughter while I go get my other daughter and stay with her while I go get my son and stay with him while I go get my wife and bring them up here. And she says, I can't do it. It was like she was in a huge hurry, and I almost like as if I was interrupting or bothering her. I can't do it. I just remember saying something like that. I got to go. And then all of a sudden she stops dead in her tracks. And she turns around and she says, screw it. I'll wait with him. That's exactly what she said to me. So now I'm like, I don't know who this lady is. And I'm about to leave my daughter with her. So I take my daughter off my neck finally. And I say, you got to stay with this lady while I go get your sister. Okay? Yes, Daddy. So I look at the lady, and it was like I burned her image in my mind just in case anything happened. And I said, thank you. I'll be right back. Off I go, back in the subdivision, fighting through this water, this current. Y'all, it's tough. I get back there. I grab my other daughter. Same thing. Carry her through the water. And I remember I was thinking, I'm going to flip my lid if I get back and that lady's gone. So I was moving, I was hurrying back to the house, to my mother-in-law's house, and then hurrying back out to the street. But I get back out there and she's still there. This is my other daughter. I kind of introduce them. I'll be right back. I turn around. That water's still coming up, y'all. I turn around. My son, who's 12, but he's very short, and was not a very good swimmer at this time. So obviously I got to carry him out too. Same thing, drag him through there. Now all I have is my wife, because I know my mother-in-law is not going to leave my father-in-law. I know that. So now all I have to do is convince my wife again that she's got to leave, that the kids are up there by themselves. You got to go. And I don't know who the lady is and all that stuff. So on the way back there, I realized I'm tired. I was almost exhausted. Y'all, to tell you a little bit about me, if you're listening to this in some other area, you're not familiar with me. I'm not a little guy. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I'm just under 6 feet tall. I'm, depending on the season, I'm anywhere between 210 and 225 pounds. And I'm strong. I mean, I've always been a stronger guy. So walking through, waist deep or chest deep water, to me, it was not a huge concern of mine. Not that I've done that frequently, but I'm a very good swimmer. And I've always had good strength in my legs and all those kind of things. So I wasn't concerned with exhaustion, but I was really tired, and it was really hard, especially when you're carrying people out. So I get back, my wife's there, and I'm like, it's time. You got to go, and we ain't got time to argue because those girls and your son are up on Highway 16 with a complete stranger. So you got to go. Come on. Well, my wife is definitely afraid of like snakes and stuff like that. I mean, she's afraid of lizards. So she said, well, how deep is it? I said, well, just come on. We'll walk until you feel like you can't walk no more, and I'll carry you out like I did them. So we do that, and eventually it gets to the point where she has to jump on my back now. And what she do? The same thing all the other ones were doing. She's choking me to death. So I get her out eventually. She gets to Highway 16 with the kids, and the lady is still there. And I mean, as soon as my wife hit that street, that lady took off. I think I said thank you to her. I don't know how to thank you or something like that. And she said, you're welcome. And she was gone. At this time, it's daylight and people are coming. I don't know where all these people went overnight, if they were sleeping in their cars or what, but people were now appearing from everywhere. It's daylight and you can kind of see it's really bad. I looked my wife right in the eyes. I said, I don't care what you have to do. You get a boat and you have them come get your daddy. I looked her right in the face and I said, I am not going to be able to get him out of there. And y'all, for those that may not understand, when you are bedridden and you have been bedridden for the length of time that he had, all your muscles kind of seize up and you are stiff. You're like a board. So it's not like I can pick him up and curl him up in my arms and carry him out, although I couldn't have done that either. I mean, it's literally just dead weight, way too heavy to get out of there by themselves. But especially when they're stiff like that, they're literally stiff as a board. And so from that aspect, I knew there's no way I'm getting him out. Now, I don't know when this water's going to stop, y'all. It might go up to the roof for all I know, which he would most definitely drown. And I would probably drown trying to save him. So I tell her that, and I look her in the eyes to where she knows I'm serious. Whatever you got to do, Wendy, get somebody back there. So I go back. And the game plan was me and her mother-in-law and father-in-law are just going to wait until I heard a boat. Now, I knew my wife well enough to know that she's going to get a boat back there. There wasn't no doubt about it. And, of course, at this time, it's still raining, y'all. That river stage is still ticking up. So we're sitting there, and that's it. We wait. A boat will come back here eventually. And I remember my dog, who is still there, and is on the couch, and she is scared to death. A little Dotson, you know, and just, you could tell. I mean, it was almost like I could read that dog's mind, and she was like, what the hell? Just looking and shaking. And so I remember I sat on the couch. The water wasn't high enough where it overtook the couch yet. It was just the lower half, and my feet were in the water, of course. And I sat on the couch with the dog. And sure enough, this is probably an hour and a half later, I hear a motor. Whoa, and here it comes. And I hear it stop. You know, I'm like, wow, I hope that boat's for us. And I hear it stop. And I see it parking, kind of, the boat was kind of like coasting in front of that front door. And so I get up and I go to the front door and open it, and there's a guy there, and he says, is there a guy over here that's bedridden? And I said, yep. And he says, we got to get him in the boat and get him out of here. Okay. So he comes inside, and there's another guy who I later found out was my mother-in-law's across the street neighbor. And he appeared, thank God, out of the blue. And then I want to say the guy in the boat had another guy with him. And so basically we all had a corner of my father-in-law. And we, you know, you have to be careful. You have to pick him up all at the same time. And you just kind of carry him. And so my mother-in-law is you know, dramatic, obviously, in the situation. And she's, y'all be careful and all this and that. And I'll never forget, you know, love her to death and totally get it. But at this point in time, we got to get this guy out of here. We're trying everything we can. And he is heavy, y'all. Even with 4 of us, it was a struggle. And we went to pick him up, and he let out like a scream. He could not talk. He was not to the point he could verbalize words anymore. So it was more of an, ah. And my mother-in-law flips. And she's like, y'all are hurting him. Y'all are hurting him. And I'll never forget that guy across from me says, ma'am, I don't have time for this. We're putting him in the boat. You can worry about that later, but we got to get this guy out of here. He's going to die. And We totally ignored her and we carried him, got him in the boat, and he was fine, y'all. Once we got him in there, we did the best we could. He was very heavy, and even with 4 of us, it was a fight, but we got him in there. My dog is as if we were going to forget her. No, we're not going to forget you. So I go back, get the dog. I tell my mother-in-law, get the boat. And we get in the boat and off we go through the neighborhood and out of the neighborhood. Now, let me tell you about this. When we were going through the neighborhood to get out, it was the first time I had really seen what the neighborhood looked like. And it was like a lake out there, y'all. Just like a lake out there. We drive through the back of the subdivision and it kind of curves around and then it curves around, it comes out to the front of the subdivision. It's not a huge subdivision, but it's just the way it's shaped. And that's the route they took with the boat. And so we come around that final curve to go out to the front of the subdivision where Highway 16 was. And there's a house. And I'll never forget this, y'all. There's a lady standing, and she had a glassed-in door. It's almost like a screen door, but it's not a screen door. It's fully glass, and then there's the actual door to enter the house. And the door to enter the house was open, and she was staring out the glass screen door. And she had a look of utter shock, and I'll tell you why. There are probably, I don't know, 100 houses in this neighborhood, 75 to 100 houses. Her house was the only one that did not flood. It must have been the one on the highest point, but it was the only one that did not flood. And her look on her face was not one of, thank God I didn't flood. The look on her face, and I read it clear, was, why did I not flood? It was almost like she had the biggest look of guilt I had ever seen. Like she felt totally guilty. It was crazy, and it sticks out to this day, her face. So we get out to the front of the subdivision. We get my father-in-law out of the boat, and they put him in the back of a truck of one of our neighbor friends. The guys in the boat then went and started rescuing other people in the subdivision. At this time, Highway 16 is just loaded with people. Everybody's got this look of holy shit. I mean, just cluelessness. It's crazy. So my father-in-law is in the back of a truck. And now I want to say the river crusted. Finally, at this point, somebody checked their phone and it was actually going down. And it had quit raining. And that sun came out. And it was hot, hot, hot. And all I could think was my father-in-law is going to die out here. Because, y'all, it looked like we were in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was that crazy. They had some people putting up easy up tents. And I remember talking to some neighbors, and it's like, maybe we can get food together in a little while and all those sorts of things. And I talked to my wife and I said, we got to figure out a way to get your dad out of here. And I had a friend that lived, I don't know, maybe 5 miles from where we were going towards Jubin. And the last time I talked to this guy, he said he was high and dry and there wasn't no way he was going to get water. Now, he had just built a house on his family's property, and it was like they actually made a hill for his house to sit on. So he was up pretty high. And I was like, there's no way he's got water. So my plan was I'm thinking what we can do is I can walk to his house and tell him, hey, we need to get my father-in-law over here and out of the sun and all of that. And we can then get in his truck and drive to Highway 16 from his house, which I'm assuming none of this is flooded, and then go down 16 to where we were about 5 miles away and put my father-in-law in his truck, bring it back to his house, all that sort of stuff. So that was my plan. So I look at my wife and I said, I'm going to go to Brian's house. That was his name. I'm going to go to Brian's house and we're going to get your daddy out of here. And she looked at me like, she's like, you can't leave. You don't know what it's like, beyond what we can see right now. And what if he's flooded? And I said, there ain't no way he's flooded. And I said, we got no choice. I've got to go get him and at least take a shot, because there was no way my father-in-law was getting out of there. So after a little bit of talking, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I remember walking down the road, and the people would get more sparse and more sparse as I walked. So I walked down, and for maybe the first 1,200 yards, it was packed full of people, because that Walmart that I told you all about was right there. And then there was a gas station on the other side. And it seemed like everybody from every neighborhood, all the way in Denham Springs, on that side of Denham Springs, all congregated in front of that Walmart and in front of my subdivision, which was further down from the Walmart on the, good bit further down, but they were congregated all right there. So I take off walking, and as I passed the Walmart, I noticed the people really got sparse. Then you would see 2 or 3 people. And then I noticed across Highway 16, there was water. And you couldn't really pass it. It was up pretty high. And I'm like, I'm going to cut through a neighborhood. And if I cut through, there was a neighborhood on the right. And if I cut through this neighborhood, I can kind of go a back way. That was the biggest mistake I made. And I'm going to stop it right here. And we'll pick it up with episode 4 next week. But it just keeps getting crazier, y'all. So I'm going to leave y'all for this episode. Thank you for listening.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino. With cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.